A century ago, Britain's rail network was the envy of the world.
You could get a train from almost anywhere.
To almost anywhere else.
But many of these lines were considered unprofitable, and in the 1960s, Dr. Beeching was recruited by the government to come up with a plan that would stop the railways from hemorrhaging money. He famously brought the axe down on over 4,000 miles of track and 2,000 stations. Almost overnight, 30% of the network was closed down. 50 years on, I'm going on a journey to discover just a few of those lost lines. I'll be walking the Penrith-to-Cockermouth line in Cumbria. I'll get an insight into the mining industry that thrived here.
That's got to be lead, isn't it?
I'll follow in the footsteps of the region's first tourists.
This is magic.
And I'll seek out some of the relics of the past.
This is brilliant. This is just what I wanted to see. And finally, experience what the lake's most famous guidebook writer described as the ultimate view. I'm here at Penrith Station. It's on the main line between London and Glasgow, and once upon a time, you would have changed here for what was one of Britain's most popular branch lines. Only now, 50 years on, it's become one of Britain's great lost railways, and I've come to rediscover it. Like so many lines, it was built to transport freight from Britain's industrial heartland to the Cumbrian coast, some 40 miles or so in that direction. But it's what lies in between those points that interests me. They used to call it Lakeland. Nowadays, we know it as the Lake District.
I'm walking the Penrith-to-Cockermouth line in Cumbria, closely following its 31.5-mile stretch that passes through some of the most stunning countryside in Britain. This old branch line is called the CKP and was opened only for goods traffic in 1864, carrying minerals like iron ore, lead and coal from the 10 major mines operating in West Cumberland and South Durham. The line cost much more than anticipated, and while the mineral traffic wasn't as lucrative as predicted, the passenger and goods traffic made the CKP profitable. Penrith Station today sees passenger and freight trains, but what I want to know is where to pick up the branch line that's been lost.
To help me get along my way, I've come to meet Ken Harper, who started working here as a youngster in 1965, and back then his official job title was Signal Box Lad. Hello.
How do you do?
Thanks for meeting me here. So this is where you used to work here?
I worked in the signal box at that end, but I spent a lot of time on the station as well.
Has it changed much between now and...
Not really. There's one or two cosmetic changes, but the fabric of the station is still as it was.
Still recognisable, you know?
Oh, yes.
This is how you remember it. Because it was 65 you started working here, wasn't it?
1965.
Yeah. And how old were you then?
16.
You were 16?
Yeah. So, yes, it was all exciting at the time.
Was it? Do you remember what it was like?
Oh, yeah. I was learning to be a signalman, but assisting the signalman at the same time.
So you were learning on the job then?
Learning on the job.
What have you got here, Ken?
This was part of the signalling system to ensure that trains didn't meet on the single line and crash into each other. The driver had to be in possession of a key token.
So what would this do then? You
right, so
handed
the
this to the
signalman
driver then?
gets that out of the machine in the signal box.
Yep.
With the agreement of the signalman at the other end.
OK.
Puts it into the pouch.
Yep.
Gives it to the driver of the train to go onto the single line. And then as the train goes past, we would hand it to the driver like that.
So then that way, no one else was allowed onto that section of line?
And it was a sackable offence for him to go onto the single line without the key.
Well, understandably.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge safety risk, I
yes,
guess.
Exactly.
Well, if I'm going to start walking the old line, where do I need to get started?
Right, if you walk across here, then the actual junction from the main line to the Keswick line is about half a mile that way.
Oh, the main line,
south.
OK.
Yes.
So I will need to be heading up there, and then I'm going to be looking to branch out
off
west.
to the right, yes.
There we go.
Yeah, it's a bit overgrown now, but yeah, I'm sure you'll spot it there.
I feel like I'm leaving civilization behind then and heading off into the wilderness.
Into the great unknown, but I'm sure you'll be okay.
And because this is still operating mainline, I've had to take a little detour out from around the station to get back here, but the station is just there. When the branch line first opened in 1864, obviously none of this was here. All of this was dug out for the motorway to be built. Back then, it was just a slow incline out from the station and away up into the hills. This is where I leave the main line out of Penrith. Just up through here. This has got to be it. Yes, that is where the branch line originally split off. And it is quite a climb out of Penrith.
I'm heading west through Blencow towards Troutbeck. There's very little left of the old branch line around here. Sadly, much has been taken back by nature, used as a public footpath or redeveloped for other purposes, like a golf course. So trying to follow the path that the railway took is not going to be an easy task.
Little track here. I reckon that track's been there a while, because I can see remnants of some stone there, and all this stuff's just been left here. And this very possibly be, I think it is, though. There's little clues here. Yeah, look at the shape of this. To me, that's saying that is the keystone in the top of an arch bridge. I reckon this is what's left of a demolished stone arch railway bridge on our line, which went across this gap here. There's another clue up there, I think. You've got what looks like a fairly modern house behind from the brickwork, but see this little hut here? That is much older brickwork there. That would have been right alongside the railway itself. That's some kind of railway maintenance hut there.
I'm a few miles beyond the old Troutbeck station, which has completely vanished. But what does exist somewhere around here is a lost relic of Victorian architecture.
Now, what better way to be brought west into true Lake District landscape than this, the Mosedale Viaduct. It's absolutely beautiful. And when you're building a railway, you want to keep a straight, flat route. So unsurprising, here in the Lake District, there are viaducts like this to help keep it as flat as they can. This is an abandoned piece of Victorian engineering that's isolated in the middle of a farmer's field here. Nobody gets to see it. It's too beautiful to be lost. Oh, it's gorgeous. Look at these brick arches. I've never seen a bad example of a Victorian brick arched railway viaduct. In the 1990s, the fate of the Mosedale Viaduct hung in the balance when British Rail decided to demolish it as a defunct piece of infrastructure. But in 1997, those plans were abandoned due to considerable pressure from a campaign to reinstate the Penrith to Keswick line. And personally, I'm very thankful for that. Coming to this side of the viaduct, train passengers would have been faced with the first big peak of the Lake District along this line, Blencathra.
I'm 13 miles into my journey on the Penrith to Cockermouth line. This was one of Britain's most popular branch lines for tourism, and you can see why. I've deviated from the track slightly so I can capture my route from a different perspective.
There it is, Mosedale Viaduct. And actually, if you use a little bit of imagination, you can see where the line came through from Penrith, heading up the valley towards Keswick. You can imagine puffs of steam snaking their way through the valley here.
But I'm not just here for the views. I'm meeting Steve Birkinshaw, a man who has an affinity with these surrounding peaks. Steve holds the world record for running up all 214 of these fells in just 6 days and 13 hours.
Steve!
Hello.
Hello. Good to meet you.
See you.
Take a pew, have a rest.
Thank you.
How's that?
Yeah, great. What more could you ask for running on the fells on a day like today?
In my mind, a fell is a hill. I mean, is it as simple as that?
I think so.
Another word for it?
It's a hill in the Lake District.
Okay.
And fell running is basically running anywhere you like on these areas.
And how popular is fell running up in these parts?
These parts, it's really popular, yeah. I guess it's been a part of the culture for, since Victorian years when the fell races actually started.
So first fell running races started back in Victorian times?
Yeah, I mean, there were some earlier ones maybe, but basic, as we know today,
yeah,
they were probably, that's when it became popular at least.
Is that because more and more people were coming in?
Yeah,
or?
so people were coming in because of the railways.
Yeah.
They wanted to go walking on the fells,
yes,
and they needed guides. And the guides then had races between them to see their pecking order, see who was the best. So it became parts of the local shows. To me, it's just, I don't know, freedom. I could just run where I want to.
I think you're up amongst the guys who have done the most fells the fastest, aren't you?
Yes, and I hold the record for going around all 214 Lake District fells as fast as possible.
Which is how long?
6.5 days.
This is really quick.
Yeah.
You must have been exhausted after that.
Well, it took a lot out of me, actually, yeah. Took 2 years to recover from that.
Goodness me.
Back to full fitness
and
now.
you're back out here.
Yeah.
So where's your route now?
I'm
Steve?
pretty much going straight back down.
Are you? Steve, really, really nice to meet
good
you.
to see you, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your run.
I'm back on the track now, and this section has been repurposed as a Lake District Park walkway. And dotted along it are still some wonderful reminders of the old line.
Old railwayman's hut. Bit of storage and shelter for the men working out on the line.
At one point, there were 135 under and over bridges between Penrith and Cockermouth, which tells you just how difficult it must have been to create a route through this mountainous landscape.
Right. This looks like it's going to be difficult to get through. In fact, it says no access. So it's a matter of time, really, before I was going to come up against something like this. This area has suffered some severe floods over the last decade or so. And as far as I'm aware, a lot of the trail up here was really quite badly damaged, almost washed away. So that's as far as I can go up here. So back round, and a bit of a detour, I guess.
There's a lot of local campaigning to get this track reinstated as a railway, so I've arranged to meet Park Ranger Kath Johnson of the Lake District Park Authority to find out what this trail means to the local community.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
So this is why I couldn't come across along there.
So you can see there's a very big bridge missing here. So December 2015, Storm Desmond hit Cumbria, and this bridge here was knocked clean off its abutments and just left as wreckage. That just happened in a 24-hour period. So they were there on Saturday morning, and by Sunday morning, they'd gone. Yeah. This was one of the biggest record storms, unprecedented levels. Historically, I think that there was just such a high volume of water. Rainfall fell in a short amount of time, 24 hours. The structures just couldn't physically stand that pressure, that force.
It must be such a tough time for the community here.
But the significance of this path was it was just such a jewel in the crown. It's a level route. People's children have learnt to cycle on this route, but people with limited mobility as well, so trampers, sort of all-terrain scooters, wheelchair access, cyclists, runners, you name it. So the loss was really felt by the community.
Do you think the line here would ever be reinstated as a railway line back through here?
Well, it's not within the realms of impossibility that we would see some sort of transport system using this route in the future. And that could be anything, you know, something like driverless pods, in fact, could be seen using the route probably.
There's a thought. There's a thought. This possibly could become some kind of futuristic transportation along this route.
Well, it's a possibility.
So I'm going to ponder on that as I continue on my journey, Kath. Well, thanks very much.
OK, yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Driverless pods sounds very Jurassic Park. While the future is uncertain, we can be sure about the past, and I'm meeting bridge expert John Mather to find out more about the man who designed this line, pioneering engineer Thomas Bouch.
Mind if I join you here? This is a nice little spot, isn't
it's
it?
absolutely gorgeous. This is one of Thomas Bouch's original bridges on the Cockermouth Keswick Penrith line. He designed 3 railways within Cumbria. All of them were well built, and altogether he designed over 300 miles of railways and some large bridges within northern England and southern Scotland.
So let's talk about this particular bridge, because this is quite an iconic bridge, really, isn't it?
It's a classic.
The inverse bowstring truss bridge. I mean, it looks a little bit like an arch underneath the bridge. What's the advantage of having it under rather than over the top?
It makes the bridge more stable because the train and the carriages are above the bridge.
Yep.
So the dead load is within the structure.
So the centre of gravity is lower.
That's right, yeah. And the actual structure is so light, it's so slender. Railways and Lake District don't combine at all. However, Thomas Bouch was such an ambitious and innovative engineer, he decided he could do it. Through force of character and some incredible innovative engineering, he managed to weave the railway line through some dreadful mountainous scenery.
Thomas Bouch was without doubt an expert engineer. He was even knighted for his achievements, but this tale has a sour end. 15 years after he completed the CKP line, he built the Tay Bridge in Dundee. But poor materials, unskilled labour and bad maintenance all led to tragic disaster in 1879. During a fierce storm, the bridge collapsed while a train was travelling over it, and 75 people died. Thomas Bouch was ultimately held responsible. He died 10 months later with his reputation in tatters.
It's a pity, really, that he hadn't stopped once he'd built some of his good bridges. He was remembered now for all the wrong reasons.
But for the Tay Bridge disaster.
Exactly, yeah. He could have been celebrated and feted for the schemes he did in Cumbria, I do believe.
Building these lines was bold and ambitious, and I'm keen to continue on this journey to see more of this old line. Keswick is a busy market town surrounded by mountains like Skiddaw. The well-preserved station platform reveals more about how the railways and hotels worked hand in hand.
Oh, closer you get, yeah. Loads of it still intact. And that whole canopy is exactly the same. The railway track curves off round to the right. That's great. Well, the Keswick Hotel is right behind the station here, purposefully so. I'm here to meet Bob, who's going to give me a bit more history about the hotel and the station here in Keswick and how much of a hub Keswick was for tourists in the Lake District. Bob, very, very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Well, this is lovely, isn't it?
It's a famous spot, this, and the 2nd of January, 1875, was a red letter day, because that's the day the first train came
From Penrith.
from Penrith
Here
going
into Keswick.
on to Cockermouth.
Oh, to Cockermouth.
And I suppose every school child in Keswick was here, half the town, an enormous cheer when the train stopped, you know, and then people got out. It was a big moment, wasn't it?
It's putting Keswick firmly on the map.
Absolutely. That's was one of the points made in the several speeches. I mean, They must have been rather boring because I think there were 15 different speeches. You know.
Really, on that opening day?
Yeah, they were wanting to say something.
Was there an element then that the railway was helping to sell the dream of the Lake District?
I'm sure it was. Although the initial reason was some businessmen who wanted to make money carting heavy iron ore from the west coast through across to Durham. That was the railway they were thinking of, but the tourist element increased.
That just made it easier for people to get here.
They did, and there were lots of hidden freedoms as well, which people don't often talk about. I mean, for example, you've got a bigger choice of a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I mean, I'm quite certain that quite a few people use the railways to have one girlfriend in Keswick and one in Penrith, and they made sure they never met, you see. Yes, it was a real freedom.
So first of all then was upper-class tourists.
Yes. If you take, for example, the design of this platform, this far end here, there's a big door, and that goes into this new hotel. And the first-class passengers could go straight from that position there without getting wet.
With the canopy over them?
Yeah, indeed. One person who came across was the Kaiser himself, Wilhelm, and he brought his cars with him. The Yellow Earl, they're all painted yellow. And he must have used the railways to get the cars here.
Were there other famous people who stayed here at Keswick?
We know Winston Churchill was here, and the royals, of course. Queen Victoria was due to come here, and she was poorly at the time and didn't actually make it, which is sad. But I think it was 1956, the present Queen, she was here and photographed in front of course, the hotel.
Queen Elizabeth II came here?
Yeah.
Well, as the railways allowed all those early tourists to head off into the Lake District, I'm going to continue my journey through as well, Bob. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye now.
This illustrious building and its adjoining platform gives me a snapshot of the exceptional standard of this Victorian route. And it's no surprise to learn that as a consequence, Keswick has retained its reputation as a go-to destination. I'm in the tourist town of Keswick, walking the old Penrith-to-Cockermouth line. I want to take a look at a curious instrument that, because it was so heavy, relied entirely on the railways for its transportation and its success.
This is it, is it?
This is it. This is the work of Joseph Richardson, a local stonemason in this area. He became very interested in the musical properties of the Skiddaw stone.
That mountain range or mountain
Skiddaw is the
group.
mountain range, and on Skiddaw you find hornfell stones, which are what these are.
Oh, there's a sound.
The hornfell, it's a metamorphic rock, and to get the musical stones to actually play, you need a rock that the grains are really close to one another to carry the vibration through the stone. And so 1827, Richardson starts playing a little bit with the stone and becomes completely obsessed. 13 years later, this is the product.
13 years?
13 years.
Can I have a little...
Certainly.
So if I was under here...
But you have to give it quite a bang.
That sounds beautifully in tune, I have to say. Is that what took Richardson so long, kind of making sure that the tone was absolutely perfect on all of these stones?
That is the real skill behind what he was doing.
Wow. So was this quite successful then, once it was finished?
It was hugely successful. Joseph Richardson and his son set off on a 3-week tour, and they didn't come back for 3 years, travelling all the way through Europe by train.
They'd take this around with them?
Yep, you can imagine the weight of these stones.
Yeah, I know. I doubt if they had roadies back then either helping them out. Do you think this would have had a bit of a reputation then, and people would have been quite excited to know, oh, I've heard about this, we need to come and see
Everybody was very excited. The boys actually went to do a performance at Buckingham Palace and had to give an encore for it.
Wow. And I've never heard rocks sound like this before. Just lovely harmonies there. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this with me, Bex. This is lovely.
I'm leaving Keswick now and trying to get back onto the old line, but some parts of it have either completely vanished or are totally hidden from view.
I want to make sure I really can find where it went. Here we go, Keswick. There's the station. which is behind me there. So from the station, it does bend around to the right, which means I think it probably hugged this line through here. So I think I need to be back just along these trees. There we go. Whenever you've got a bit that's built up suddenly, like this here, that says to me, railway embankment. I'm back on track.
I'm 20 miles along the old line from Penrith to Cockermouth, tracing the route to the old mining village of Braithwaite to check out the now defunct Force Crag mine. This area was once an industrial landscape, and the railway at the bottom of the valley in Braithwaite played a big part in moving all the lead and zinc mined here. Waiting for me is Ian Tyler, a man who had the explosive task of blasting the rocks with dynamite.
Quite a walk, that, Ian.
Ah, it is, isn't it?
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
I made it. So, this is Force Crag Miners.
Well, basically, you're looking at Lobbs Mill, which was the first real, properly constructed workplace for Force Crag Mine.
And that was and mine opened up here when? How far back are we going?
The first mining would be, if we said 1755.
Goodness me.
So we're going back a long time.
We are. Tell me, what was being mined here? What minerals were coming out of the hillside here?
We had 3 basic minerals. First of all, lead.
Yep.
Zinc and barite.
Well, part of the challenge here must have always been getting the mineral from the mine here to export it out to where it could be sold and be useful.
Yeah, we got the mineral, but we couldn't get it away. It was difficult.
Well, well, it is quite isolated up here, isn't it?
We've got a 2-mile road, which you've enjoyed walking this morning.
I have.
The railway suddenly arrived
and
and altered the whole scheme of things. Now we've got access to heavy carriage and moving things away. Before, it was a horse and cart. Well, where are you going to go with a horse and cart? You know, 1 cart only carries a ton and a quarter.
So when the railways did arrive here, Braithwaite was the station where all this mineral would be loaded with it, but along with mines all around as well.
Yeah, just in this valley, there were 10 major mines and quarries, you know.
Wow.
So this was a real industrial landscape.
There's some lovely machinery behind us here now, but I imagine there's quite a bit more to see down below.
Absolutely, yeah, the mill is completely full.
I'd love to go and see if we can,
Off we go. Careful down here.
Yep, thank you. This is all...
Just give me your hand.
Yeah, I've got you.
Oh, you're a
I've
good
got
man.
you.
I can feel strength in that.
It's beautifully tranquil and peaceful here at the moment. But back when those mines were operating, with that, I imagine it was probably quite different.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great, all of this, Ian. Well, here we go. I'm just needing a second to take all this in, Ian. There's a lot of it in one place. It's quite cramped in here, isn't it?
Yeah, and noisy.
Oh, the mill then was all about what? Crushing and processing what was coming out of the mine.
And separating the minerals from the gangue rock.
Okay.
You know, that's all. All we're doing is making it into proper, workable mineral to leave to go to the railway.
So you would have lead, you'd have barite and zinc.
That's it.
I was happy to be given the full tour through this wonderfully preserved mill. And I can tell Ian misses the days of blowing up rocks in the mines here.
Enjoy your walk back down the road.
I will. I mean,
Don't get lost.
You've given me so much enjoyment seeing all this, Ian. Thank you very much indeed.
And now I'm getting back on track and heading over to Braithwaite so I can see where all those minerals were loaded up.
As a tourist coming to the Lake District today to enjoy picturesque walks and this famous scenery, it's easy to ignore the fact that for centuries, tourists coming here would have experienced heavy industry as part of this landscape, from the likes of the Force Crag mine. I mean, just look and listen at how quiet it is here now. But just here is the old Braithwaite station, what is now been converted into this picture-perfect cottage.
It's private property, so I've been given special access.
But look, you can see the edge of the platform right here. And this is where all the minerals from the mines in the surrounding valleys here would have been delivered and consolidated to be loaded onto heavy freight trains to be taken off around the country for further processing. It is a world away from what we've got here now. But it's a really important part of this area's history.
I'm 3/4 of the way into my journey now and heading to my first taste of what this region is renowned for: stunning lakeside views. There are 16 bodies of water in this region, but only one of them is traditionally called a lake. Lake Bassenthwaite is the 4th largest in the country.
In 1965, construction started on one of the main east to west coast roads in the north of England, the A66. It's this road just beside me here. Now, the railways often took the most efficient route through the landscape. And so when the old CKP line closed down in 1966, it was the obvious choice to build the road following the same route. In fact, for much of its length through the Lake District, the A66 is built right on top of the old CKP line, including this stretch here alongside the stunning Bassenthwaite Lake.
The rapid growth in car ownership in the 1960s meant road networks were being extended all over Britain. People were swapping train journeys for car journeys at an alarming rate. The railways were suffering a dramatic drop in passenger use, and the way to stem the huge losses was for the axe to fall on over 50% of the stations across the network. It simply wasn't profitable to run routes like this anymore. Following this old trackbed, I'm hoping to find a lost relic of the old railway. But 52 years on since this line was closed, you never know if any of it will still exist.
That's the thing with these old railway lines. Sometimes it is a nice smooth path. Other times you have to work a little bit harder to find the route. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that I'm right alongside the busy A66 here. Cars, vans, lorries continuously streaming past. Now, somewhere up here, I'm expecting to find Bassenthwaite Station. I've seen some photos of it, but I've no idea what state it's going to be in now, or if it's there at all. It could have been completely ripped down and demolished. But that's all part of the fun. It's part of the adventure. This is man-made, that's not natural, that is big old stone bricks. That's platform, maybe, embankment. Let's have a look, confirm that. Oh yeah, confirm that in a sec. This is great, this is old railway archaeology through here. So this is the station, and that little brick wall that was now sunk into the ground there, I reckon would have been the edge of the platform. So the railway would have been down there, dug out. I'm so pleased there's something left. Let's see if I can compare this against how it was when there was a railway here. Do you know what? It is actually from roughly here. You've got the 2 windows just down the end there. You've got this row of maybe 5 or 6 windows just in here, and this gable sticks out. This is excellent. This is exactly it. These are the little surprises that I absolutely love finding along the route here, because they are genuine surprises. When you do find any kind of remnants, it's nice, it's special, it kind of brings the line back to life for you. But you've got to do your work, you know, you've got to put your homework in and a bit of physical work to get here as well. But it's so worth it.
I'm nearing the end of my walk along the Penrith to Cockermouth line in Cumbria, which cuts through 31 miles of the most stunning Lake District scenery.
I've arrived in Cockermouth on the western edge of the Lake District National Park. Our freight trains would have continued another 8 miles or so out to the coast, but for most tourists, this was the end of the line, which is rather apt, really, because the man who encouraged many of those early tourists to come to the lakes in the first place actually came from here.
Cockermouth is an ancient market town where romantic poet William Wordsworth was born and spent his young adult life. He brought the wonders of the Lake District into the hearts and minds of people everywhere. He even published a guidebook for the lakes in 1820. Now, this little book was undoubtedly responsible for the early influx of tourists to the area.
All right. Oh, with the line running through here, this is where Cockermouth Station once was. I mean, there's very little, if any sign at all of it here now. But the trains would have come in here from Penrith and then headed off towards Workington in that direction. Now, the main reason so many tourists ventured as far as this is because by the 20th century, the station here had been cleverly renamed Cockermouth for Buttermere. Buttermere has always been one of the most revered lakes in the whole of the Lake District. So to follow in the footsteps of those Victorian tourists, that's where I'm headed now.
Buttermere is the unspoilt jewel in the crown of the Lake District, but it's 10 miles away from where I am here in Cockermouth.
Now, there was no railway to Buttermere, so much like the tourists back in the 1920s and 30s might have done, I'm going to indulge in some newfangled motor transport. This is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, 1925 Humber 1225.
But this is exactly the type of vehicle that tourists coming up to lakes might have come to take their day trips.
Yeah, it's not always as nice as today, but we have got...
Oh, is this for me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
Bit of a jacket to keep you warm.
That's made to measure, that, Chris.
Yeah,
lovely.
suits
Look
you.
at that. Take us away, Ken. So hand signals to indicate.
Yeah, everyone was used to that.
We better just hope everyone else on the roads are used to it now.
Well, yes, but I think they're looking at us because, you know, we've got some style to us.
We do. I guess this is what it would have been seen as back then as well, travelling in style, this.
Yeah, and this is for your richer traveller.
Was it quite an established day trip then for tourists coming in on the train to get a car from Cockermouth to Buttermere?
Yeah, they would have advertised, and you'd write a letter ahead booking your place. So that
well ahead.
Yeah, when you arrive on the train, the man's there waiting for you to take you on your day trip.
So was this kind of day trip and, I guess, access out into these more remote areas of the lakes the reserve of the rich and the affluent few?
No, they had shower bangs. 10 people, 12 people, squeeze them in.
So shower banks would have been kind of middle classes, probably,
yes, yeah.
being able to afford that.
Unfortunately, the poor working classes just don't have that money to get out and about as much. Unless you wanted to walk. If you can get the train to all those different train stations you've been stopping at, you could walk from one to the next.
It makes people smile when it comes by, doesn't it? Yeah. Everyone loves this. God, look at this. This is why people wanted to get out of Cockermouth and come and see this. You know, I guess the motor car allowed you to do that.
Yeah, and quicker than the horse would have done.
Of course. This is magic. Woo-hoo-hoo. Amazing. Amazing.
The tranquil surroundings of Buttermere are simply breathtaking. You can see why poets and writers have been attracted to this place for over 100 years. It's off the beaten track from the railways, but without them, many people would have never got to discover this unspoiled, natural beauty. One of the lake's most famous writers is Alfred Wainwright. He produced 7 pictorial guidebooks on the lakes that are still a go-to guide for tourists today. To tell me more about the man is Chris Jesty, who's been on a mission to retrace every path and fell that Wainwright ever documented.
How much time did it take you to do the lot?
10 years and 3 weeks.
Wow.
It was from 2003 to 2013.
You have rewalked every possible route.
Yes, every route and every path that was shown on the original, I've walked them.
It sounds like an incredible amount of work that you undertook.
Oh, well, you must remember that I did nothing else for 10 years.
Was it an enjoyable experience?
Oh, very, yes. You know, a lot of people say, oh, they'd like to live in a farm or something. But in a farm, you see the same scenery every day. But I see different scenery every day.
How did you come to be so involved in Wainwright's world?
I first suggested to revise the books, I think, in about 1980.
Okay.
And he said he didn't want it done until after his death. And that was in 1991. And Haystacks was the place that he chose to have his ashes scattered when he died.
See, that was his favourite then, was it?
It was, yes, yes.
Yeah.
In the end of the last volume, he gave a list of his 5 best fells, but he said he had regretted omitting Haystacks because it wasn't as high as the others, which I thought was a shame. But he said that apart from altitude, he thought that Haystacks was the best.
It makes me feel like I need to go and experience it somewhat myself.
Yes.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for meeting me down here. I mean, the surroundings are just wonderful, aren't they?
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
And that's where I'm heading. The lakes simply do not cease to impress and inspire. There it is, look. Wainwright's favourite fell here in the Lake District, Haystacks. It is a fair way up, but it's got to be done. The Lake District is undoubtedly one of Britain's most distinct and popular places to visit. It has been for centuries. Before the railway, the upper class came by horse-drawn transportation, and so the arrival of the CKP line revolutionised the tourism industry here, bringing more people and not just the elite. Now that the railway has gone, it's the motor car giving access to all this, to all people. So whilst how tourists have arrived has shifted over time, why they come here has never changed. And I don't think there's any more I need to say to explain that.
Next time, I'll see why the lost Somerset and Dorset line brought financiers to their knees.
It was this thick, boggy marshland.
I'll make an unexpected discovery in a lost world.
Oh my goodness me. The labour intensity, along with the cash, would have been phenomenal.
And I'll learn that cutting costs can cost lives.
Well, it killed people.